Okay, we are back. Seriously? Months later, Henry asked Nancy to be his wife. When both their masters agreed, Henry and Nancy were married. Soon there was a little baby, then another and another. Henry knew they were very lucky. They lived together even though they had different masters. But Nancy was worried. Her master had lost a great deal of money. I'm afraid he will sell our children, she said. Henry sat very still. Okay, I already read that. So, but just in case that got deleted or whatever, we read that again. So, as I was saying, it is really, really hard for people who are not treated like they are human beings, like they are treated as if they are just things to be bought and sold, right? To the highest bidder. That is really incredible. And and if you can believe it or not, they're still doing that today. They just try and do it in different ways, right? Because nobody would stand for this, but some people do. It would seem that nobody would stand for splitting families up, but some people do. And they all do it for the same reasons. They all do it for money. They all do it for the same reasons. Henry worked hard all morning. He tried to forget what Nancy had said. Can you imagine worrying all the time about being separated from your children? Can you imagine worrying about that all the time? His friend James came into the factory. He whispered to Henry, "Your wife and children were just sold at the slave market." "No," cried Henry. Henry couldn't move. He couldn't think. He couldn't work. "Twist that tobacco," the boss poked Henry. Henry twisted tobacco leaves. His heart twisted in his chest. Can you imagine feeling so sick about losing something and still having to work like that? Sometimes we sometimes we do really have to know about lives of other people and how hard they are. Sometimes we really do have to know that. Because then what we do is we do something about it. We don't just learn. What we do is we try and do something about it. Like we try and get to know people who look different than us, right? At lunchtime, Henry rushed to the center of town. A large group of slaves was tied together. The owner shouted at them. Henry looked for his family. "Father, father!" Henry watched his children disappear down the road. Where was Nancy? He saw her the same moment she saw him. When he wiped away his tears, Nancy too was gone. That's such a sad, sad story. You can see the reason why a lot of people don't want to read these kind of stories. For sure. For sure. But we have to tell people's stories. And hopefully it's written in a way that little kids can understand too. Henry no longer sang. He couldn't hum. He went to work, and at night he ate supper and went to bed. Henry tried to think of happy times, but all he could see were the carts carrying away everyone he loved. Henry knew he would never see his family again. Just like that. Just like that. It happens. Not we People lose their families for all kinds of reasons, right? People can lose their families just like that for all kinds of reasons. Many weeks passed. One morning, Henry heard singing. A little bird flew out of a tree into the open sky, and Henry thought about being free. But how? As he lifted a crate, he knew the answer. He asked James and Dr. Smith to help him. Dr. Smith was a white man who thought slavery was wrong. They met early the next day at an empty warehouse. Henry arrived with a box. I will mail myself to a place where there are no slaves, he said. James stared at the box, then at Henry. What if you cough and someone hears you? I will cover my mouth and hope, Henry said. So you can see here that white people didn't always go along with everything that was happening. But more than that, the black people needed the white people. They needed white people who didn't believe in this in order to help them. That's what they needed. They would have never been able to be free without the help of people who were different than them. Dr. Smith wrote on the box, to William H. Johnson, Ark Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Henry would be delivered to friends in Philadelphia. Then he printed on the crate in big letters, this side up with care. Oh my gosh, he's gonna mail Henry. Oh my gosh. That's what it sounds like. It sounds like he's going to mail Henry. How could this be? Henry needed an excuse to stay home, or the work boss would think he had run off. James pointed to Henry's sore fingers, but Henry knew it wasn't bad enough. He opened a bottle of oil of vitriol. No, cried James. Henry poured it on his hand. It burned his skin to the bone. It must be acid. It must be acid if it burned. Now the boss would have to let him stay home. Dr. Smith bandaged Henry's hand. They arranged to meet the next morning at 4 o'clock. See how sometimes people were so desperate to be free. Sometimes we don't think about it. But when we have our freedoms, we are very blessed to have them. And, you know, a lot of times people don't think about the fact that they are blessings, that they're blessings that we have for our freedoms. The sun was not yet up when Henry climbed into the box. Ready, he said. James nailed down the lid. Dr. Smith and James drove to the station. The railroad clerk tipped the box over and nailed a paper to the bottom. Dr. Smith begged the clerks to be careful, but they didn't listen. They threw the box into the baggage car. Oh. Hours passed. Henry was lifted up and thrown again, upside down. He heard waves splashing. This must be the steamboat headed for Washington, D.C. The ship rode smoothly, but Henry was still upside down. Blood rushed to his head. His face got hot. His eyes ached. He thought his head would burst, but he was afraid to move. Someone might hear him. Oh my goodness gracious. Can you even imagine being upside down all that time? You can see how badly people wanted to be free, that they would actually get in a box and mail themselves and for a trip that took so long. I'm tired of standing, someone said. Why don't we move that box and sit on it, said another. Henry held his breath. Could they be talking about his box? Henry was pushed. The box scraped the deck. Now he was on his right side, now on his left, and suddenly right side up. You know, you have to count those things as blessings, is what you have to do. How wonderful that somebody was watching out for Henry. I think so. Do you think so? Do you think somebody was watching out for Henry? I think somebody was. I don't know. I think we're getting through this story a lot earlier than I thought I was going to. What do I have for you? I got something for you. Oh, it's 8:46. I guess we're not getting done with the story early. What do you think is in here? The first man said. Mail, I guess, said the other. I am mail, thought Henry, but not the kind they imagine. Henry is carried off the steamboat and placed in a railroad car, this time heads up. He fell asleep to the rattling song of the train wheels. I wonder if he's going to see his family. I don't think so. He awoke to loud knocking. Henry, are you all right in there? All right, he answered. The cover was pried open. Henry stretched and stood up. 4 men smiled at him. Welcome to Philadelphia. At last, Henry had a birthday, March 30th, 1849. His first day of freedom, and from that day on, he also had a middle name. Everyone called him Henry Box Brown. And that's the end of the story. That was a very short story. But you know what? Let's read the author's note here. There's an author's note. I'm just reading over here. I'm reading about who they're dedicating this book to. It was just a dedication. In the mid-1800s, there were about 4 million slaves living in the United States. Slaves were owned like tables or cows or wagons. Historians believe 60,000 and 100,000 slaves escaped to freedom traveling on what was called the Underground Railroad. All the secret ways slaves made their way from the south to the north. They hid them in carts, rode them on horseback, walked hundreds of miles through forests and swamps, and crossed flowing rivers in summer and icebound rivers in winter. Conductors and station masters hid them and helped them throughout their journey. When Henry Brown climbed into his freedom box, he hoped he'd be carried to a safe world. He brought along a small tool to make air holes, a little water, and a few biscuits. Henry arrived in Philadelphia having traveled 350 miles from Richmond, Virginia in 27 hours. His story made newspaper headlines in America and Europe. Henry never found Nancy and his children. In 1850, he went to England, and there are some reports that he married again. We do know with absolute certainty that Henry Box Brown became one of the most famous runaway slaves on the Underground Railroad, the man who mailed himself to freedom. One of the most famous men on the Underground Railroad, and I never knew this story. Did you know this story? I mean, it makes sense, right? It makes sense that why wouldn't you mail? And I'm sure that somebody like a kid would have thought that too, right? Just mail me out of here, right? But for being one of the most popular stories of the Underground Railroad, this was written in 2007, so not that long ago, right? 15 years ago, not that long ago, and I'm just hearing about Henry's story now. I hope you liked it. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. Thank you for joining me in the Early Bird Classroom. I'm sorry that we have a little bit of a choppy signal. It looks green down here all the time for me, but apparently not some people aren't very happy with what I've been reporting about Albert I. Mayor. You're not so much the mayor of this town. And oh, by the way, no reason to be, held up in your cell over there because nobody's digging you. So, Dr. Annette Feravich, thanks for joining me in the early bird classroom. And yeah, I will see you tomorrow. And tomorrow we will be doing math and science on a Tuesday, not on the Wednesday that we usually do. We're here Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday this week. I have some appointments, important appointments on Thursday. Thanks for joining me in the early bird classroom. This is Dr. Annette Feravich. I'm the teacher. This is the classroom.